Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is The Flash, issue number 226, dated April 1974. Overall, this comic was a fun read. This is a comic I actually do remember buying off the newsstand. And I enjoyed it as a 7-year-old, and I enjoyed it probably a little bit more as an adult, because some of the things that didn't make sense to me as a 7-year-old make sense to me now. Though this comic will not tax you intellectually too much. There's a decent A story and a pretty good A story, and the B story is the more well-known in this issue because it's the last team up of Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams doing a issue of the Green Lantern. And this story is usually regarded as the weakest that the two had came up with. I honestly didn't think it was really that bad a story, but in comparison to what they had done earlier, yeah, I could see this as being considered the weakest of their great output. So then take a look at the cover. The cover is by Irv Novak. And we see Barry Allen here stylishly dressed as he's centering the cover here. That was the one thing about Irv Novak as an artist. He drew his characters very contemporary. If you saw an Irv Novak comic in 1972, people were dressing like that. And if you've seen one that he had drawn in 1979, that's what people were dressing at the time. And we see Barry Allen here, and he's kind of torn between two identities. One is obviously his Flash persona, and the second one is Captain Cold. And whether he should continue his, kind of like superpowered cosplay career as one or the other. Because when you think about it, both heroes and villains in comics, they're rogues. They're all rogues, but some of the rogues are on the side of justice or the law, and some of the rogues aren't. And we see two posters here. One is Flash, touting him as the fastest man alive. That asshole Superman, swear to God, he's always trying to take this title away from him. So whenever Superman is in Central City and he sees posters like this, it drives him nuts. But somehow Flash is just able to, just kind of barely beat out Superman for that title. And Barry Allen has to be thinking, God fucking damn it. Everything this guy has, he wants to take this away from me. So probably going through some of that angst. And we see a wanted poster for Captain Cold. Captain Cold, I have to say I'm impressed with him. I'm impressed with this man. He has standards. And I'll get into that in the story. Take a look at the first ad. It's for a Daisy BB gun. This is the type of ad that would not fly today. I remember these in the mid-'70s. I think from around 73 to 75, Daisy, they were doing a lot of advertisements in comics. I didn't think anything of it one way or the other, though. They probably should not have been doing this. So we're going to go into the story proper. The title of it is The Hot Cold War in Central City. I'm going to take a look at the creative team. And the story is by Carrie Bates. I've been doing a lot of Carrie Bates lately, but that's not by design. That's just how things have worked out. The art, I had mentioned, Irv Novak is the main artist here. He does get a little bit of help here. But Irv Novak was sort of DC's in-house style guy. The same way I kind of think of Sal Buscema as kind of personifying the Marvel style in the kind of mid-'70s. Irv Novak had kind of taken that role for DC. He was a very good artist, but he was a guy who wasn't really a passionate comic book guy. This was a 9-to-5 job for Irv, and even though he was good at it, he didn't really have any great passion for it. They could have taken him off the Flash and said, listen, you're going to be doing romance comics. He's like, fine. As long as the checks don't bounce, I'm good. But nevertheless, the art's good in this issue. So we see Barry Allen. He's in, I guess, police headquarters at this point. Barry Allen is a police scientist. He's a forensic scientist. This was something I think that was relatively new at the time. And it was definitely new to the public at the time. They sort of had to be educated in terms of what this is. Kind of the same way that Quincy educated the public on what a medical examiner does. So anyway, he's opening his locker. I guess it's probably the end of the day. And he decides that he wants to spring into action. He needs to cosplay. So he opens up the hatch in his ring, which contains his costume that automatically expands when it's exposed to light. It's a terrible device, but nevertheless, I mean, for plot convenience, it's terrific. Barry Allen, so Barry Allen, he looks at the Flash costume, and he's like, "Holy crap! This thing looks ridiculous. I can't go out in this thing." And he decides he wants to go in another persona that he feels that's kind of more reflective of who he is. And it turns out it's Captain Cold, which is one of the Flash's main villains. The Flash, one of the things about the Flash was the Flash had an unusually good lineup of villains, a rogues gallery. The Flash had probably the strongest one in the DC universe, other than Batman. Even Superman. I mean, Superman, of course, he had Lex Luthor, he had Mxyzptlk, Brainiac 5, and then it kind of gets a little dicey after that. Toyman? I don't know. So anyway, nevertheless, Barry Allen does costume up as Captain Cold. So this is the setup we're given. So this is the preview page of the story that we're expecting. And, kind of Carrie Bates here addresses the audience directly. Unbelievable. Barry the Flash Allen has become his own worst enemy. I don't know, is Captain Cold the Flash's worst enemy? I would think Mirror Master, but that was the one thing. Flash had a lot of good villains, but he didn't have a really great villain. Or at least an A-plus villain. He had kind of like the B-plus guys. So we get into the story. It starts off in the Central City prison. We're not told what state Central City is in, but nevertheless, the city can actually maintain its own penitentiary system. So rather than this being kind of a state facility, this is actually a city facility. But it's for dangerous, criminals and so forth. And one of them is being freed, and it turns out that it's Heatwave. And he's being paroled early from his sentence here. He's being greeted by the warden, who's saying, "Hey, listen, you're paroled. I congratulate you. You're out of the system, and I hope you kind of learned a lesson, as all good supervillains should." And Heatwave here is saying, "Yes, I have. I'm gonna be a really good boy. I was a terrific inmate here. I followed all the rules. I was very subservient to the guards, and I'm going to continue that subservience when I'm out in the civilian world. So you don't have to worry about me, Warden." So this is the stuff that Heatwave is telling the warden, and there is one inmate in this prison who is absolutely disgusted by this behavior, and it's Captain Cold. Captain Cold is watching this. Apparently he was in the same lockup as Heatwave. They're both supervillains. Their main enemy is the Flash. So they have that bond. And Captain Cold feels that Heatwave should abide by the criminal code that they have. I guess it's kind of like the rogue code. And that is that when you are sentenced to prison, your job is not to follow the rules. Your job is not to suck up to the prison establishment. Your job is to cause as much trouble as you can and try to escape. and there's no servitude involved in that. You're defined against those prison authorities. And Heat Wave decided not to go that way. Heat Wave decided he was going to go on bent knee, and he was going to polish all those apples, and do everything he can to get out early that way. And Captain Cold is disgusted by this, and he proves my point when I was walking through the Spectacular Spider-Man 149, where Spider-Man was beside himself, that the Jackal, when he was unveiling his plan, he lied. He lied to Spider-Man. And that is sort of the code that Captain Cold he wants that upheld. And I'm sure if he had listened to Spider-Man, he would have been beside himself that the Jackal actually lied to his super nemesis. Because again, criminal code demands that. So anyway, he's furious, and Captain Cold, he feels the need to enforce this. So this is not simply some edict that criminals tell themselves. At least not to Captain Cold. He expects this to be abided by, and he's going to enforce that code. So anyway, we see Heat Wave. He's leaving the prison. He's just smiling, all happy, kind of like waving his hand to the warden. And then we see Captain Cold, and he's going to put his plan into action. And we're told here that the first accomplice in this is the Postal Service. Again, one of the things, because this is a Carrie Bates story, one, there's a lot of twist, and two, everything makes sense, at least on paper. In reality, it doesn't make much sense. But nevertheless, Carrie, he dots his I's and he crosses his T's. So we'll find out in a few moments. So then we go to Central City Police Headquarters. So Barry's sort of working at his job, and he's getting the morning mail. So he's going through the morning mail. Yeah, got a few junk letters. But he notices one particular letter that captures his eye. He notices that there's no return address. Back then, you could actually mail something without a return address. The only thing that would happen is that if there was a problem delivering that piece of mail, the post office would just simply throw it into a pile, since there's no return address. The rules are different, obviously, for the past couple of decades. So anyway, we see Barry, he's reading the letter, and he's thinking to himself that it's a list of instructions, and for some reason, he finds himself compelled to obey. So we're being told here that what Barry is doing at this point on is something that he doesn't want to do. He's sort of being mind-controlled or hypnotized into doing this. We take a look at a little bit of the letter. We see a bit of it shown to the audience. It says that one of the instructions is that Barry Allen is to go down to the police evidence room, and he's going to pick out a particular piece of a particular item from there. And it turns out that Captain Cold, as these events are going on, he's kind of thinking to himself what is probably happening, and he's wrapping up for the reader why Barry Allen was sort of hypnotized. And it turns out that in this prison, there's a laboratory. And if you are behaving well and you're kind of not causing much trouble, you can have the privilege of actually doing scientific experiments in this prison. Kind of a dangerous thing to have prisoners do this. I mean, is this how Walter White would work on his formulas and stuff? But nevertheless, this warden, he sees no problem with, allowing criminals access to dangerous chemicals and other substances. But it turns out that Captain Cold is working on some type of germ, a strand, and he's close to perfection. And it turns out that Captain Cold is taking the substance that he had created during his time in prison. Now, normally, they do have work in prison. Normally, that's actually involving working for actually large companies. There's a huge industrial prison complex industry going on, but nevertheless, I don't think they would allow them to do something like this. But what Captain Cold had developed was sort of these hypnogerms. And I think the idea is that the letter would be infected with these germs, and when the letter got into contact with Barry Allen's hands, that's when the germs kind of took over. So this explains why Barry Allen was hypnotized. I'm sorry for that tortured explanation. And we're told here that part of the hypnotism involves Barry Allen fetching Captain Cold's uniform and his ice gun. And then he's going to take that home. Now, we're not told what's going to happen after this, but Captain Cold, he does, share this expository dialogue explaining that Barry Allen actually won't have any memory of him doing this. So after Barry Allen performs these deeds, they'll go right back into his subconscious. And then Barry Allen kind of leaves. Then he kind of forgets everything that he had done. Again, lots of plot convenience here. But as Barry Allen is walking home, he sees a police officer heading toward the First National Bank. Barry Allen's listening, hey, what's going on? The cop's telling him, listen, there's a robbery at the bank. Now, before I go back to the story, take a look at this one ad, and it's for karate. I remember in the 70s, there were a ton of these. The one I remember most was, I think, the Count Dante one. It was really weird because he was actually an Irish guy, but he had this he had this afro and kind of like this very ethnic look to him. Apparently there was this big thing with dojo wars involving him. This was a pretty good ad. There's another ad here, kind of, this is really weird. It kind of very homoerotic. Once you read it, you'll definitely see the homoerotic imagery here. Skinny bro is going up to his muscular bro, and he's tired of being skinny and weak looking and kind of having his sand being thrown into his face. The flexed out bro, he's telling, listen, I used to be skinny like you, and I just started working out. Probably taking a lot of steroids. And then he comes back to the beach all buff, and the women are crowding him, but I'm sure he'd rather be with his bro there. Okay, so then, upon hearing the news of this robbery, Barry Allen goes into action as the Flash. He's thinking about heat waves, because apparently he knew that heat wave was going to be paroled this day. And he was kind of hoping that heat wave would go straight, that he'd have one less headache to deal with. But it looks like that might not be the case. And once he arrives at the bank, he finds out it's not the case. See, that heat wave is there. Remember, this is the guy who just got paroled. He was in prison. He was likely involved in the prison industrial complex, where they basically have enslaved labor. I think the prisoners are paid maybe from $1 a day to $5 a day. And they're doing all this work for actually these large corporations. And they're not getting paid anything at all. It's basically like slave labor with a slight little technicality that we're giving them something. But nevertheless, that wasn't enough for Heatwave to comfortably live. So he went to the bank. And of course, he went to the bank because that's where the money is.
He needed the money.
And this makes a lot more sense than what some of the Marvel villains would do. Because guys, you'd see guys like the Wrecker, and they would rob jewelry stores. And I'm like, dude, you fence this stuff, you might get 1/5 the value. Why not just go to the bank where you can get 100% of the value of what you stole, rather than say 20% of what you stole? But nevertheless, that's an argument for another day. Also, Heatwave can go to a patent office and maybe patent that gun, which might be valuable to the military, so he can make way more money than robbing banks. But these are questions that supervillains don't ask. It's part of the rogue code. So anyway, excuse me. So anyway, Heatwave, he's set to face off against the Flash here. So he uses his heat gun, and he immediately ignites the area around the Flash. And Flash is caught by surprise here. But nevertheless, and he's also in danger because these flames are hurting him. But nevertheless, his super speed, he's able to spin himself enough that he can actually blow out the flames. Heatwave is a little surprised by this. He shouldn't be. Nevertheless, he is. Then the Flash is going around in circles around Heatwave, and this is disorienting him. And at this point, Heatwave is kind of feeling a little defeated. You know, things didn't work out. The Flash actually fought back. And he might have been like a little rusty from his time in prison. He also might have lost a little bit of that edge, kind of sucking up to the warden. But nevertheless, the Flash bails Heatwave out. The Flash disappears. He had Heatwave on his heels, and then he just kind of lets him go. And Heatwave is even surprised by this. So we see the Flash, and he's heading toward an alley. And the alley has the briefcase that he had used to smuggle out Captain Cold's equipment. So one thing I'd forgotten to mention is that when Barry Allen had left police headquarters, he had taken the Captain Cold stuff with him, and he had smuggled it out using his briefcase. So that's what he's coming back for. So Heatwave, he's a little confused, but nevertheless he's pretty happy that the Flash kind of did that unexpected favor for him. And Heatwave, he's trying to calm himself down. He's saying, listen, dude, you got lucky, and sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, but you have to be more on your toes the next time. And then Heatwave is kind of like going through some self-reflection here. And he feels that maybe that screw up that happened, maybe it would not have happened if he had his bro, Captain Cold, with him. And he's thinking back to the days of past when it was him and Captain Cold, and they were taking on the Flash. And even though they were always defeated at the end, Captain Heatwave, I should say, he feels like he would have been much more battle ready had Captain Cold been there for him. Sort of like being his muse and just kind of uplifting his criminal game. And he's kind of sad that, the captain is behind bars. Captain chose that. Remember, Captain Cold, he decided he's gonna follow the rogue code. And that is like, hey, you get out because you escaped, not because you were let go. And so anyway, as Heatwave is kind of going down memory lane here, he slips on a sheet of ice. And as Heatwave is sliding down this sheet of ice, he's thinking that it must be my bro, Captain Cold. It has to be him.
Thinking a lot about you lately. Well, that's why I wrote this song.
And Heatwave turns around and he sees that he's right. And he is thrilled. He is like, listen, I knew you were going to get out. We're going to team up. You're going to be my inspiration. Hey, I can be Rocky if you be my Mick. And then it turns out Captain Cold doesn't say anything to him. And he immediately encases Heatwave in a block of ice. And Heatwave can't believe this at first, but he can get out of this because Heatwave has kind of like this specialized asbestos outfit that that allows him to heat up without harming him directly. So he's able to melt this ice. And then he immediately goes after Captain Cold. And, you know, at this point, you know, the bromance is over. It is gone. It is finished here. He engulfs him in flames, I should say. And Captain Cold here, we see he's kind of panicking because he doesn't really know what to do. And I'm going to take a look at an ad here. It's for Disney characters. I think these ads, I think, only ran a couple of issues. I think Disney might have gotten pissed off about this. Because it doesn't say they're Disney products. It says they're Disney kin. They're kin to Disney. And I'm thinking like Disney's lawyers got... Oh, no, it does have copyright Walt Disney Productions. Okay. So anyway, we're going to go back to the story. And everything that's seen here, we see it from Heatwave's point of view. So the inner thoughts of Captain Cold, we don't know what's going on here, at least for the moment. And Heatwave is noticing that Captain Cold, he's acting very atypical of him. Usually there'd be a lot of insults, a lot of bravado.
This is great banter. It really is.
But he's not hearing any of that from Captain Cold. And then we finally see the thoughts of Barry Allen coming through. Because remember, Barry Allen was the guy who stole Captain Cold equipment out of the police locker room. Or the police evidence room, I should say. So the thing is that when Barry got hypnotized by that letter, he didn't forget that he was the Flash, but he had an overwhelming urge to be Captain Cold. So this is something that Captain Cold, when he sent the letter, he didn't know this. He didn't know Barry Allen was the Flash. He just knew that Barry Allen had access to the Captain Cold equipment. So that's the reason why he had sent him the letter. And the thing is that the desire to fight as Captain Cold due to these hypnogerms was so overwhelming that he had put his Flash persona aside. So the thing is that as he is Captain Cold here, he's being engulfed in these flames. He doesn't know how to fight this as Captain Cold. So he's beginning to panic at this point because as the Flash, he can get out of this, but as Captain Cold, he doesn't know how to get out of this. So anyway, somehow, probably just through coincidence, Captain Cold, he's able to follow this fight as it's going on. And what he's figuring is that Heatwave is really not a killer. Captain Cold, he'll kill you. He's a cold man. But Heatwave, he's kind of like not like that. So the last part of the letter says that Barry Allen is to battle Heatwave to the death as Captain Cold. And there has to be two outcomes. And either he goes to the morgue or you go to the morgue. So this explains why Barry Allen here is really kind of just in this this ball of flame, just kind of panicking here and not knowing what to do, because that urge to fight to the death due to those hypnogerms is pretty strong. So anyway, Captain Cold is kind of playing out what the end game is from what he expects to happen. And what he expects to happen is that Heatwave will kill Captain Cold. Heatwave will see that it's actually not him that he killed, but Barry Allen. I think Heatwave might know who Barry Allen is, if given the fact that Captain Cold knows who Barry Allen is. And he's thinking because Heatwave will view Barry Allen as an innocent victim, even though it's not true, because he's dressing up as Captain Cold, and he's fighting Heatwave. I don't think Heatwave is going to view Barry Allen as, quote, innocent, but nevertheless, Captain Cold is counting on Heatwave to do those mental gymnastics, and this will sort of drive him mad. Because again, he doesn't really view Heatwave as kind of like a hardcore criminal. Again, this is the difference between a mobster and a racketeer. And he thinks Heatwave's a little soft, and that, you know, his conscience will get the better of him. And at the same time, you know, Captain Cold, he doesn't care. He doesn't care if Barry Allen is murked. That's fine with him. He said, listen, that asshole has been in enough of my trials and helped put me away that I don't care if this guy goes. And he's a cop, ACAB. And Captain Cold, he's also relishing getting even with Heatwave for breaking the road code. So anyway, as Captain Cold is being very triumphant in his prison cell, Heatwave, he's getting a little squeamish here because it's really looking bad for Captain Cold. He's basically he's well done, as Heatwave just says. He's well done at this point. So anyway, we're going to take a look at an in-house ad, and this is for those large Treasury editions that both DC and Marvel were selling at the time. As I had mentioned in other podcasts, the comic book companies want higher priced items on the newsstand. I remember buying these. I remember enjoying these stories. They're very much New Deal stories. But I remember this one being a lot of fun as a read. Oh, the interesting thing here is that at this point in time, the first issue of Action Comics, the first appearance of Superman, had recently sold at an auction for $1,800. So in 1974, someone putting up $1,800 for a comic book, that was considered huge. I think in 1978-79, the Fantastic Four #1, that was officially $1,000. And that was actually a big landmark at the time. See another in-house ad. This is for the subscription service. Again, this mailman who, again, he kind of looks like Adolf Hitler. I don't know who drew this guy. And we see some of the comics here. The Superman I had looked at, that issue of Superman. That was a good issue. I remember buying that off the newsstand. Again, another ad for bodybuilding and self-defense. And another in-house ad. This time it's for the Treasury edition of Batman. And again, these are some fun stories. I like those early Joker, Scarecrow stories because those guys were kind of scary. They were murking people. And I believe there was also a Neil Adams story in here that was really nice. So then we get back to the story. The fireball is gone. And we see Heatwave. He's looking at the sidewalk here, and he sees the ashed outline of Captain Cold. Now Heatwave doesn't know about what was going on with Barry Allen and so forth, so he thinks this is the real Heatwave that he had murked. And he was a little disappointed, saying, hey, kind of expected a little bit more from this guy. Kind of gave up a little easy. But, you know, hey, what the hell? Hey, I don't follow the road code. So, you know, if he's gone, hey, tough on him. And as Heatwave is talking to himself here, the Flash interrupts him. And now Heatwave's a little surprised by this. The Flash picks up Heatwave by creating this suction as he's running. So as Flash is kind of basically carrying Heatwave in this kind of wave of suction behind him as he's running in super speed, Heatwave is going to fight back. And the thing is, he not only has the gun that he uses for his power, his heat powers, but also his goggles here. So then Heatwave is able to ignite the Flash's boots here. And the flames are so intense that even kind of that friction aura that protects the Flash's body and his costume, because you imagine you're running at super speed like this, you're putting a lot of wear and tear on that outfit. If any of you remember the Flash TV show from the early 90s, I think each of those suits, and they had to have multiple suits, cost $1 million. And I think they ran through about 3 or 4 of those suits because the actor in it was sweating so much. He would destroy the suits just from his sweat. So you can imagine that the costume would be taking a lot of wear and tear if it wasn't for, along with his body, if it weren't for this, quote, friction shielding aura. But even that's not enough for the heat that's on his. So anyway, this is not enough. Even that aura isn't enough to prevent the Flash from being harmed by by the flame here. So then the Flash runs into an indoor ice skating ring, which I remember, and it kind of did look a little bit like this. And the Flash goes into the ice rating. So so anyway, the Flash needs some relief from the flame here that's striking his boots, and he heads toward an ice skating ring, an indoor ice skating ring. I remember nearby where I lived, there was an ice skating ring. It actually did look a little bit like this. So the Flash, he runs into the ice skating ring. He runs onto the ice itself. And he's using the ice to kind of put out the flame that's kind of like, growing at the bottom of his boots. He still has heat wave caught up in that super suction. And here we see the Flash going through some pirouette motions here. He's grabbing heat wave, just kind of spinning him around and just letting him go, and just letting him smash into the ice, smash into the board there, give him a concussion or two. And the threat of heat wave is over at this point. Ice skating, figure skating was very big at this time in the mid-'70s. So anyway, we see a little bit of a wrap-up. Now, the Flash has to fetch that Captain Cold outfit because he has to get that thing back into the locker room, because it's still evidence against someone who was convicted of a crime. So it turns out that Flash is kind of giving the readers a little bit of a kind of a wrap-up of what happened. And basically what happened was that when Barry was in the fireball as heat wave, he realized he couldn't get out at that moment. And his survival instincts kind of snapped the hypnotic spell that he was under. So when he realized that, this is really bad for me as Captain Cold, he immediately reverted into kind of that Flash mode. So he went into his Flash persona, and he used his powers as a Flash to get out of it. So like I said, Carrie Bates, he crosses his I's and dots his T's. See, a few days later, heat wave, he's taken back to the prison. If nothing else, the guy violated parole, and he wasn't probably told about what happened to Captain Cold. But because he seems surprised when he sees Captain Cold in his jail cell. He's saying, "How the hell can you be here when I murked you out there?" And Captain Cold, he's kind of enjoying the situation because his revenge plot it didn't fully work out the way he wanted it to, but it still had a nice ending for him. The Flash is still around, Barry Allen's still around. Heatwave isn't quite the broken man that he thought, but he's still kind of crazy and a little nuts, and he's freaking out over seeing me here. So he's going to take what he was given. He was going to take those little victories, and he's just going to enjoy it as Heatwave is kind of freaking out here. And that's the end of the story. I thought it was a pretty good story. I enjoyed it. And we see underneath the Super Friends. And I loved the Super Friends as a kid. It was my favorite Saturday morning show. Okay, before I get to the B story, I'll take a look at this one ad for Sea Monkeys. This is something that never had any appeal to me whatsoever. And I think the most memorable thing about them was the episode of South Park. But nevertheless, it was scary. The amount of living creatures that you could order through the mail at this time was a little scary. Okay, going to take a look at the Green Lantern story. And at this time, Green Lantern and Green Arrow had been officially separated. They were going through their own adventures in some of the various DC comic books. So they didn't have their own title per se, but you could always catch a small little B story, in Action Comics or The Flash. Usually The Flash had a Green Lantern B story, but occasionally they would have a Green Arrow. This is Green Lantern 1. And again, this is the last team up with Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams with this character. Many readers feel that this is probably the weakest story they had come up with. And I would kind of agree with that, but only because of the superiority of the rest of the output. I thought this story was fine in and of itself. It definitely is reflective of how the team had broken up. So when you look at the first issue that the two men had worked on, which is Green Lantern, Green Arrow 76, they had such lofty ambitions for what they wanted to do with the character and the scope of problems that he would deal with and the type of stories that they would address. And after the run of Green Lantern had ended, then there was a three-part B story in the Flash where it was a much more personal look at the two men. I think it was called the Soul of the Archer. And rather than taking on these big topics, which they originally touched upon in the Green Lantern, they started shying away from that, simply because the two men kind of disagreed so much on the topics and the point of view and how to approach the topics. Where they decided, okay, we're just going to do this one personal story and the inner soul of this one character when faced with this huge existential crisis. And then you have this one solo story, which it kind of feels a little bit throwaway. It does sort of subversively touch upon drugs, but not too deeply. And people kind of viewed this as kind of a forgetful issue. I didn't think so. I thought it was a pretty good issue. Same way, it turns out that we're given the preview of what's coming up. We see the Green Lantern. He's holding on for dear life. And his inner thoughts indicate that his power ring is no longer working. So at this point, he's basically an ordinary man who finds himself in this incredibly dangerous situation here, as he looks like he's about to plummet down this huge crevice here, as he's on this rock formation. And we're told that the story is the powerless power ring. And I had already mentioned the creative team here. So we see how Jordan is enjoying nature at this time. He wants to get away from the city. He's currently unemployed. So it's not like he's on vacation here. And he does make a point that he's like in between jobs here. Because at one point, Hal Jordan, he was bouncing around from job to job to job. I think for the longest time he was a test pilot, then he was like an insurance agent. And I think in these then recent issues of Green Lantern, at this point, he was kind of unemployed. He did have the rich girlfriend, Carol Ferris, so he can kind of lean on that there. But nevertheless, Hal's kind of feeling the stresses of urban life. He wants to get away, to the country where it's kind of a much more simpler and much more rustic environment. I was never an outdoors person. I've rarely camped out. The few times that I did it, I was absolutely horrified by the experience, and I hated it. But nevertheless, there are people who do have, positive feelings about going out into the wilderness. I'm assuming that since Hal is kind of based in San Francisco at the time, this is probably redwood country. So anyway, Hal's he's kind of just enjoying his own thoughts here, contemplating, his life and where he is. He's also enjoying where he is at the moment here. He's noticing that the air smells fresher, things are quieter. I don't have to worry about the stuff I have to worry about when I'm in the city. It looks like he's cooking up a recipe that he had gotten from Oliver Queen here. Oliver Queen, he was a guy who was a billionaire, and he lost all his money. So he had to learn how to stretch those dollars. So Oliver Queen became really good at cooking chili, because chili's one of those things where you can kind of make it on the cheap, at least back then. So Hal's kind of taking advantage of this kind of knowledge, this school of hard knocks knowledge that Oliver Queen learned. Hal's going through the same thing. He can't call up his girlfriend asking for an Applebee's card or something. So anyway, it turns out that one of the ingredients is mushrooms, but the mushrooms that Hal is using are coming from a can. So technically they should not be those type of mushrooms. But we're sort of throwing a curveball here, and we kind of question whether they really are those type of mushrooms. Hal's enjoying his meal, cooked over the fire. Again, that was something that was not appealing. Whenever I did hot dogs or marshmallows over an open flame, they never cooked properly. And but nevertheless, here, Hal is kind of enjoying his meal. He says, and this does play itself out later on, Hal actually did bring a newspaper with him to kind of read. But he decides, you know what, I'm fully committed to the rustic life, and there are no newspapers there. So he kind of just blows it off, and he's just going to enjoy the ambiance. He's here in front of the campfire, and just kind of enjoying and living his best life. So anyway, Hal, he's a little tired, so he decides to go to sleep. But he has one last chore to do. Normally, when you go to sleep, you want to make that one last trip to the bathroom. Hal's not doing that. Hal does not shit in the woods. Hal is not going to shit in the woods. I know that. So anyway, he turns into Green Lantern, because he has to repower his power ring. He has to do this every 24 hours. And he likes doing this, when he's officially in his uniform. So Hal is at this point costumed up as the Green Lantern, and he powers his battery. So at this point, his power ring is 100% refreshed. And then suddenly, as Hal finishes his oath, we see that Hal sees this huge, sudden light display in the sky. And it's largely dominated by yellow colors, although there are a few other colors mixed in. It's largely a yellow light display. Hal makes note of this because it's an event that he wasn't expecting. And he actually does have a couple of ideas on what type of event this might be. But it immediately disappears. And Hal's thinking to himself, oh, it might have been, kind of just some random natural phenomenon, and I don't really have to worry about it. So at this point, Hal's going to go to sleep with a good conscience. So Hal is sleeping in his sleeping bag here. We see that the campfire is out at this point. And Hal is actually sleeping in his Green Lantern outfit here. So he kind of feels more comfortable when he's sleeping there. This is kind of like the monster who keeps the gun under his pillow. So like when Hal sleeps, he's not really sleeping. And it turns out there's a large black bear coming toward him that's growling. I don't know that much about bears. I do know that they will eat you alive. So you want to stay the hell away from them. That I do know about bears. But in terms of black bears, I'm not quite sure how you would deal with them. Because I think with the brown bears, you just kind of just don't bother them and they'll just kind of go away. I think with the black bears, you make a lot of noise and you make a lot of sound, and that sometimes will startle them. And when they get startled, they'll tend to go away. I know with polar bears, you just kind of hope that you have a slower, fatter friend with you, because that's the only way you're going to survive a polar bear attack. So anyway, Hal's sleeping, the bear is growling, bear's looking for a morning snack, I guess. Hal wakes up to this. He suddenly wakes up. He realizes he's kind of in trouble here. But he has the power ring. The power ring's all powered up. And he doesn't feel that he needs to be too rough with this bear. He figures he just has to grab it with, using a shape that he can create with his power ring. Kind of set it forth maybe a couple miles away. He's thinking, hey, I saw that nice Brady family. I'll just send them this bear. But that doesn't work because Hal's power ring misfunctions. I should say Green Lantern's power ring misfunctions here. And the bear is still a threat because his ring isn't doing him any good. However, rather than going on the offensive with the bear, Green Lantern goes on the defensive. And he basically uses his power ring to create a stand for himself, where he elevates himself just above the bear. So the bear can't climb this thing, and Hal's safe from its reach. So he just basically waits for the bear to go away. This is the one thing that Hal feels he can do with the ring, because since it had malfunctioned so badly earlier, he doesn't really trust it at this point. So then it turns out the bear goes away. Hal is left wondering what's going on with his power ring. So he decides to test it out on some old tree. And the idea is that he's going to will it so the tree would be gently uprooted. Rather, the power beam that is expelled, it destroys the tree. So Green Lantern knows that the ring itself is malfunctioning. And he also notes that he's not feeling well. And that after using the ring, he started feeling woozy and kind of he's kind of like a wave of illness is passing through him. So Hal, I keep saying Hal, Green Lantern notices that there's something going on between the ring malfunctioning, him not feeling well, and maybe that natural event with the yellow light is somehow tied in together. And Green Lantern is thinking that it must be something with the ring itself. Because as perfect a weapon as the ring is, it does have an impurity. And this explains the whole yellow thing. It's kind of like the Guardians found this amazing element that it can be willed to do all these things, but there's one small impurity that they can't do anything about. And that impurity causes problems with the color yellow. So that's sort of the kind of the scientific explanation using comic book physics that we're given here. However, Green Lantern's thinking, hey, listen, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm in, Redwoods, California here. There's no one around me. So, as long as I can keep the bears away from me, I shouldn't be in any trouble. And this type of issue can be investigated later on when I get back to Emerald City. However, this option has been taken out of his hands because apparently there's kind of like a rock slide coming, and Hal just notices it, and he barely gets out of the way of it, but he hears a voice crying out for help. And then Green Lantern, he takes out his binoculars and he takes a look, and he sees a climber, a female climber here, and she's kind of like trapped on the cliff. So this is kind of like that cliffhangers, so to speak. So the story literally has a cliffhanger in it here, and Green Lantern's noting that she's in a great deal of danger, and one more rock slide could lead to her demise. So, and because of the way the ring is malfunctioning, he actually doesn't want to use it because he feels that he could accidentally make the situation worse because he can't trust what the ring is going to do. And Hal trusts himself because, listen, the Guardians picked this guy for a reason. This guy has balls. So he takes his own climbing equipment, and he climbs the face of the cliff to save this woman, basically as Hal Jordan, but he's in his Green Lantern duds. Take a look at this one ad. This is for a bunch of novelty stuff. Again, if you're reading comics at this time, this is definitely a well-known ad. Go back to the story. See a nice little montage of Green Lantern. He's climbing up that ledge, and he's doing it without any superpowers at all. And again, this is kind of like, Denny O'Neil saying, you don't need to be in a costume to be a superhero. And he's just climbing up and up. And you just feel, as Neil Adams, the way he frames this, you just feel him, Green Lantern, just grabbing onto every crevice here, and his muscles are worn. Now he's actually pretty close to the climber at this point, and he feels like he's close enough where he can probably grab her, and but he's still in kind of like, I hope this works. But then what happens is as Green Lantern is reaching out for the climber here, there's a second rock slide. Second rock slide comes down. Then we see a kind of a recreation of the splash page for this story, as Green Lantern is holding on to this cliff literally by his fingertips here, and then he lets go, and he just couldn't help himself, and but the thing is that he knows that, hey, listen, I'm falling. The laws of gravity, they're applying to me here, and my ring which can negate those laws, it doesn't work. And he's just trying to think, what the hell can I do to get out of this? But then it turns out that it was instinct. He was like, well, listen, I have no other options but to try the ring. The ring may not work perfectly, but hell, it's better than going splat. So it turns out the ring does work. And Green Lantern is able to create a larger avatar of himself using the power of the ring. So basically, whatever motions that Green Lantern makes, this larger avatar that kind of like, is wrapping itself around him will also make the same motions. And using this, he's able to rescue the climber with no problem. Now, Green Lantern, he takes the climber back to his base camp. He's being a very gracious host. He's just kind of like making light conversation. He's offering to cook a meal for her. And this is the chili that he had made earlier based on Green Arrow's recipe. And he also mentions the light phenomenon that had happened earlier and whether she had noticed it or not. She notes that she was aware of the phenomenon. Apparently, it was something that was reported on the radio, and it was some type of event involving the weather and a comet that had come together. So again, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, they're making it clear to the reader there was a logical explanation for that phenomenon. And then the climber, she notes something about one of the ingredients that Green Lantern is using for his chili. And it turns out to be the canned mushrooms. And apparently, also in the news, there's been a recall for these mushrooms. Apparently, they've been causing a lot of people to become somewhat inebriated. And because of this, they were issuing dangers not to purchase these mushrooms. So again, O'Neill is kind of offering an explanation as to why the ring was malfunctioning. So it wasn't the natural phenomenon event with the lights, but it turns out that maybe Green Lantern was a little hopped up on some mushrooms. And the climber notes that this story actually is in the newspaper that Green Lantern didn't want to bother reading after tasting these mushrooms. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe there was a little bit of a subversive message in this story with Denny O'Neill and Neil Adams saying, listen, don't listen to the establishment. Don't listen to the establishment about this stuff. And everything kind of wraps in a bow. And I guess Green Lantern, he didn't really care for his trip on mushrooms. I've done psychedelic mushrooms. They've been fun for the most part. I've never seen any kind of light displays, although sometimes shadows will kind of like fool me into thinking there's something else. But if you are going to take these substances, I would recommend going to the Bay Area. There are places where you can get them legally. If you decide to use them, I'm saying for the first time, make sure you're in a place that you're comfortable in, because that's going to be really important, because if you eat them somewhere where you're not comfortable, you're not going to have a good experience. And I found that with mushrooms, that microdosing is actually better than, say, a macrodose. Because you get a macrodose, that's way more powerful than anything, 420 will give you. So those are it's kind of like my little hints. Now, there's something kind of strange here, in that the comic book is telling us that the next issue of The Flash will come out in the last week of February. But this issue is dated April. And I know the dates on the covers tend to be a few months in advance. This way the comic book companies would have a fair amount of certainty that the newsstand dealers will at least keep this issue out until this date before trying to return it. But still, that seems kind of like the dates didn't seem to match. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the letters page, the flashgrams. Got a few letters here. First letter was very complimentary. It's about issue number 223. And apparently, according to Scott here from Maryland, he's saying that issue reminded him of those Flash issues from the 1960s that he really enjoyed. And if you've read Cary Bates's stuff, it tends to be closer to Silver Age stuff than Bronze Age. So felt that Cary kind of captured the spirit of the 1960s, along with Irv and his art. Then, second letter is about Green Lantern. And he's kind of going through the history of Green Lantern, saying pre-Neil Adams, pre-Denny O'Neil, Green Lantern, kind of boring and dull. Then, during the O'Neil Adams era, the stuff was really good. And now that era has passed, it officially has passed with this issue, but clearly there was less and less output from the duel with this character. He's feeling that Green Lantern is going back to kind of that dull, mundane feel that it had before those guys. So he's not happy with the direction that Green Lantern is going in. And we see another letter that it liked the Flash story, but it didn't really care too much for the Green Lantern story. And the same. And then there was then the next letter was kind of the opposite. Didn't really care too much for the Flash story, but liked the Green Lantern story. And then one of the editors is leaving the comic here. So that's it. That is my review of The Flash, issue number 226, and I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.